So what we will be talking about today is basically how to improve your employees, but also your own productivity with ChatGPT. I used a bit of a like hashtaggy title, and maybe to get a feel like what we are talking about first. I created a GPT basically for influencer outreach, which was Shin's idea. And we can give it a spin later in the questions when you want to try it for your own brands. But I just basically made a small example for myself as a micro influencer, just to give you a feel like what it can do in general. And it basically generates an outreach email in this case. But before that, I defined in my prompt that I first want specific information integrated. So it first is asking additional questions, and then it starts to create an email to be as effective and resonant as possible. And that's the stuff that's possible with GPTs. And if I would give these information now, it would create me a pretty personalized message, which is basically pretty tailored for the specific influencer you want to target, but also for your brand and incorporates all of that information. And if you look basically behind the curtain, what's behind it in the GPTs, it's basically just a prompt, capabilities, which are basically stuff like searching, creating images or coding, and also some knowledge. So knowledge could be like additional data you want to give it, but also PDFs and additional instructions. So for example, if you want it to have access to some of your products, and some description of your product, you could provide that in the knowledge, and it can automatically access it and use it basically to give better answers. And in here, you can already see my prompt, which is pretty complex, which gives detailed instructions like what it has to do, what are the rules, and also what are the process it should follow in crafting a message like that. And in all of that, we basically enforce behavior and can customize ChatGPT to our own needs and also to specific tasks, which makes it way easier for you to basically improve your employees' performance, but also your own, because you don't have to give like all of this information in every new chat. And also if you have like a GPT, it's way better at cohering to that prompt across a long chat. Whereas if you use ChatGPT, it often loses track of the instructions you give in the beginning or some instructions you gave in between to make it, for example, more professional and stuff like that. Let me switch to the presentation quickly. Okay, nice. So basically that's what we will be talking about. Like first, a little bit of an introduction. What are LLMs? What is ChatGPT? I will fly over that. If anyone has more questions, just raise your hands and I will get more specific. Shin, maybe if I don't see it, just give me a quick shout out. Then basically some mental models. So how can you or how do I think about ChatGPT? Some practical insights. So basically what is the main focus? So what tasks can be automated and how can I teach this to my employees? And then lastly, I aggregated some nice tools and resources, especially in the D2C case, what you can use, what you can basically read to improve additional stuff like prompting and things like that. Yeah. To start with a quote, so it basically says, even if you would stop developing any technology in AI right now, it would take us years to digest the capabilities because it's so powerful and it hasn't even been figured out yet what it can do in the tech sphere, that it will take a long time, how much it actually can do and for which task it's most suitable. But because the model is so general, it will be suitable for so many different tasks that you can improve the performance across the board. And the limit at the moment is not really what the technology can do, but rather what we do with it. So basically, we are bottlenecked by our imagination. And we have like three main bottlenecks we recognize in different companies I've worked with. So they often aren't working or trying out enough stuff. And this means often it's basically given to the developers or the software engineers or the AI people, yeah, figure that out and basically improve it or make it usable for our users. But this is mostly, it's a little bit too restrictive because we are not trying enough stuff. And also these models aren't the most powerful in the hand of the developers, but in the hands of basically you, the domain expert or the experts in a certain field. So, for example, your marketers, your sales guys, your supply chain guys. At the same time, we are not sharing enough. So you always have to try to basically share different ChatGPTs, different GPTs, different prompts, interesting chats you had, so you can learn from each other and cross-pollinate, we call that basically ideas, because you never know, like when a marketing guys share a prompt or a GPT with a sales guy, maybe they find something new, something interesting. And also, at the moment, most companies are really focused on the short term. So they basically only do like emails, social media, text improvements. And you should try it for like really critical and more complex use cases as well, but you just don't really think it could work yet. Often it's just about figuring out how it could work by giving it enough information and enough context. Yeah. And that's basically how you, in the end, there are three big things how you can get your employees to another level. It's like experiment, share, and also encourage the people to tackle the complex and just waste a little time basically in ChatGPT to get it to get to know it, and also to learn to delegate, because often it's like surrendering tasks in the end, which is not the thing that most people want to do. Yes. And what I said before, it will be the most powerful in the hands of your domain experts. So, and this means basically higher productivity. So you can do more work in the same time. You can remove filler tasks, which is stuff like writing emails, extracting information from documents, but also generating options for social media text. So I often use it to just generate like 10, 15 headings, 10, 15 texts, and basically pick the best ones and then just adjust them from there or combine multiple. And also, it's a power up. So we have a bunch of employees who weren't good coders before. So I'm running an AI agency where we do implementation. And basically, they were project leads, and now they're doing full coding projects on their own and managing the projects as well. Yeah. The biggest issue at the moment is like the fear, like people fear being replaced by AI. But in my experience, especially LLMs and generalistic models won't replace them, but rather it will be a complement. And they might be replaced rather by a human who is using these technologies, and not by the technology or the AI itself. And so this is basically the meme. And it will never take over the most complex tasks. And also we won't see the extreme that the like most tasks, especially knowledge work, will be done in isolation or by a human alone. But we already see like in most tools, AI is already being integrated like across Microsoft, across Google, and this will be the future. So it will always be like human in the loop, where you combine AI and humans working together and basically getting the best results, where you use AI just for its raw power and its speed, and the human for like defining the problem, refining the output, more of the creative stuff. Let's look at what ChatGPT is. So a language model is something that is able to generate text in some way. Pretty general, but you can use it in so many different things. So basically, you can use it to analyze sentiment. So basically, if a user sends a message or sends a comment on your face, you can ask it, yeah, is this positive, negative, is this critical? And you can automate that across scale. You can also flag toxic content, so bad reviews you got, you want to get off your website. You can answer questions, you can summarize documents. But also what I often do, because sometimes you get a little butthurt if you get a bad or a toxic comment. I have a ChatGPT which always enforces basically nice messages. So whatever I write in that, even if it contains like cuss words and stuff like that, it always improves it. And how they work in the end, they always pick the next word. So however much text you dump in there, they always predict only the next word. And if you see that here, for example, if you have like the text, the cat set on the, and basically then it has a whole list of options it could pick from. And then it picks most often the most likely one. So this could be, for example, here, the floor, the ground, the bed, the couch. And this is learned from previously seen texts. So it basically has consumed all of the internet, a lot of books and stuff it has access to. And through that, it learned some patterns. So basically, it has seen the text the cat sat on the 100 times. And after that, always was a different word. But it aggregates that basically to learn like what could come next. And they have two components. One is basically just for reading, and one is for writing. And one is basically dissecting the text, reading it carefully, understanding what it means, understanding the semantics, the grammar, the structure. And the next one is taking that information and generating new text by picking a suitable word that fits into the grammar, into the structure of the text, and into the previously seen words. And that already leads us to like some of the mental models. So many people say they are like stochastic parrots. So they don't understand or innovate anything, but they only basically repeat what they have seen before. But this for me is a little bit short-sighted or not accurate because it's like way more complex. It really builds an understanding of the world and how stuff works just through seeing a lot of documents. Another one would be like a simulation of human thought, where they have like quick glimpses or short moments of human thoughts, where, like, for example, a coder solves a problem, a person is crafting a tweet, or a customer support agent is responding to a query. But once you have to go beyond that, so if you have to, for example, generate a whole book and really long text, it really falls down. So it can't do that anymore because it can't simulate the human thought long enough. That's probably my favorite mental model is the book smart intern. So basically, you got a guy completely fresh out of college, which was really smart, had good grades, read all the literature, but in the end, is it really practical what he learned and can he really execute? And this is how you can see it in the end. So basically, you have a book smart intern, which is supporting your expert, which is doing a bunch of the simple work really well, but the more complex task, he needs a little bit of guidance. And the last one is basically a co-pilot. So it's your partner complementing your abilities. And this is more like how a mental model for how to work together. So basically you give stuff over to the AI that the humans aren't good at. So basically generating a lot of alternatives like in a short amount of time, giving more insights, analyzing a lot of information at the same time. And the humans are rather used for like the more complex, more creative aspects of the work, where the human judgment and the intuition are key. And through that, the AI will make any job more efficient. And over time, you can even think about like AI could take over some stuff like writing emails, answering to simple comments, and it's rather like fly by the wire. So let's dive into like more of the fun stuff, what you're here for. So what tasks can be automated? So AI tools basically complement you in two ways. One is like as an extra brain, which is like speeding up any cognitive task or allowing people to perform more complex tasks than they would originally be able to do. And the second one is like an extra pair of hands, just doing things faster, doing higher level tasks, and enhancing ability of unskilled laborers. So the good example is always like doctor and nurse. Suddenly the nurse would be able to just do much more because it can use language models and ChatGPT to process the information that usually just a doctor would understand. And my favorite questions always are centered around time. So what are the tasks you're really annoyed with that take up more time than necessary? What tasks do you have to perform regularly, but which take away from like your most valuable and creative and complex work? And also what tasks do you have to perform most frequently related to your core work, even the stuff you usually identify yourself with, which you're doing most often, because that are often tasks which is well documented and also over the internet because many people have done it already. And in that you have basically two variables. So basically generic versus domain specific and repeatable versus highly variable. So generic versus domain specific basically means how specific is it to your specific job? How specific is it to your specific domain? And repeatable versus highly variable, how consistent is the task? So a highly repeatable task basically is solved by software because it's just the same input and the same output you expect all the time. But a highly variable task is a little bit more complex. So this would be something like generating social media texts because you have different inputs all of the time and you also expect very different outputs most of the time. And this on the bottom right is a very good use case just for using ChatGPT. The top right would be a use case for specialized generative AI, which is a little bit more complex. So basically fine-tuned versions of the models or GPTs, where you basically give them capabilities and knowledge to make them more specialist. Yes. And once you basically have a list of tasks, identifying the most suitable ones is about good prioritization and not really the technological know-how. So basically what you're already doing in your day-to-day. And you basically want to assess two things. On the one side, it's the impact, which is basically a term of like frequency and value. And in that, we are either looking for like e-commerce tasks, which have like high frequency but lower value, which is basically like in your warehouse where there's a high throughput and going on all the time, or like doctor tasks. So tasks where you have like a really expensive person, but a lower frequency. And the feasibility is always highest. Where do you have a lot of data? So basically, if you're writing social media text, how many social media texts are already in existence? It's a lot. And also, where is the cost of failure limited? If you're writing a bad social media post, it isn't as bad as if a doctor, for example, makes a wrong diagnosis, or if you have a misorder to your supplier, which does like double the or 10 times the amount. And for the principles for LLMs or working with them, which you can teach your employees. It's basically think input output. All you nowadays need to solve most tasks is provide text that contains the relevant information, some guidance on how to solve it, and also a little bit of context like what do you want as the output. And the second part is basically take the output from the text that's returned. It's often wrapped in additional text or something like that, but you just have to extract it out of there. And you always want to try to basically give it all you know about the problem at hand. So really dump everything you know in there, copy out text from your knowledge base, dump like an additional description, dump a few examples in there. And also always try to generate multiple options. So try to basically get it to, in the social media case, generate multiple headlines and generate multiple alternative for the main text. And then you can pick and choose the best ones or give it feedback, write more professional or write like different authors you already like, which are really popular. And then extract the useful things and go from there. But it already always gives you at least a good starting point, or at worst, it gives you a good feeling of what you don't know in the don't want in the end. So basically you explored all the different options you already don't want. So you should have a better feeling of in which direction do I want to go. The 10-80-10 is always a good principle for like 10% is defining the task, 80% is done by the model, and 10% is basically just taking the output, adjusting it, or correcting it a little bit. And here always like the Einstein quote, a well-defined problem is half solved. The better you define it and the more context you give it, the better it is able to solve the problem. And the last one is basically steal everywhere. Look for generative AI startups, people building on Twitter. Most often what they are building, you can replicate to at least 80% of the performance with just an employee and one guy and one good prompt, and that's it. And in the future, task will be lean. So there is a new startup from Jason Calacanis, which is basically using coders to replicate most of the big SaaS startups, which he thinks are overvalued or overpricing their stuff. And they are just trying to replicate all of them with tools like ChatGPT to basically bring down the prices, but also make money in the end. And this is what it will look like. You will have like people who are way more productive, and you also will need way less tools because ChatGPT will unify a lot of them into one. Some looks into how to teach your employees. So first, you want to ask them a lot of questions, which is basically what we defined in the long and create a long list of tasks you could automate. Then you prioritize them. So basically look at the impact, the feasibility, and try to get like a short list of 3 to 5 tasks which provide the most value and get started on them. And also encourage them to experiment. Let them start with simple stuff like what I necked a little bit before, basically writing emails. So force them to write every email with ChatGPT or have every email improved by ChatGPT. Encourage them when they have to write social media posts to generate 100 different options before they create the final one. And when they have to do research, they aren't allowed to basically read the website themselves, but they have to basically feed it into ChatGPT and ask it to extract the information they want to have. And once they get the hang of it, they basically can start to improve. So you first have to get a feel for how it works, what it is like the mechanism. And then you can start to give them resources at hand, like prompt engineering, which is in the appendix, where they really can try different prompts. And then you can force them like to do like more crazy stuff. So try one new prompting technique each day. And that's the key to improving with ChatGPT, basically trying a lot of different stuff and trying to learn something new every day. And also you can build it into workflows and meetings. So any meeting I run, basically I have ChatGPT open and ask it to generate alternatives, ideas, questions to ask and stuff like that. And lastly, that's the most crazy stuff, is basically invite them to build new things. So ChatGPT makes everyone a designer, an engineer, or product manager, as long as they want to have like enough trial and error. And anyone can build software nowadays. You just have to use the right tools. And yeah, that's already what I told, basically. Once the people get power users, once they get better, they will never go back. Some tools and resources, like the two big things, are basically ChatGPT and GPTs. GPTs are in the end just ChatGPT with custom knowledge, a custom prompt, so instruction, what it has to do, which basically specializes them on a task, and also some capabilities, which is a little bit too advanced for now. And this is the prompt they gave him, which is basically what I mean. So it's customized for a specific use case with custom instructions, capabilities, and data to optimize. And to get started with GPTs, there are basically now thousands of GPTs out there. And I often look at them to get inspired, but also to steal starting points. So if I want to define a new GPT, I basically go out there, steal their prompts, and get started from there. And often it's like something like I showed before. I based it on an email outreach bot, which was just for general emails, and basically stole their prompt and adapted it to my use case. And here's just a quick step-by-step guide. So in the left, you see the GPT Builder, which is basically a tool from OpenAI that allows you just through a chat to define your own GPT. So it just asks you questions over time, and you just give it like, I want to create a bot that helps D2C brand to outreach to influencers and craft perfect cold emails and messages. And then it analyzes that and asks you additional questions, like how do you want your message to look? And then this is a first good draft. And then I look for the existing GPTs and integrate that into the prompts. And then to even notch the performance up, you can look for additional inputs from experts. So basically blogs, podcasts. So basically you can steal the stuff from Nick and Moise, what they told you about, and just put it into the prompts or give it as a knowledge source. And then lastly, you can also use ChatGPT to improve the prompt. And what I like when I work with like external people and employees, I want to bake in the success criteria. So basically, if you have like success criteria for a good outreach email, I bake it in, like especially in the inputs, like what inputs do I need? So it is successful, and I bake it in and say the model, it has to have this information. And if it doesn't have it, it has to ask the user basically to provide that before it continues. And lastly, always test, iterate, and look for small improvements. And this is just some advanced stuff. I will close it here. You can look through it in the presentation, like plugins, code interpreter, what it means. Like ChatGPT app, basically just go for a walk and talk to it. It's crazy good. Some D2C use cases like website optimization. So basically take everything Nick mentioned in the podcast and throw it into a prompt and look what text you get, product descriptions, SEO optimizations is a good one, analyzing customer feedback, but also customer success messages. And here are some more general use cases, some people to follow, things to read on prompting, and basically tools to use beyond ChatGPT. If you want to reach out, feel free. So basically, I have my AI agency where we also do like GPT management and GPT creation for a bunch of brands. And I also run like personalized newsletter, which we completely automate, like News Butler. We plan to do a newsletter on AI in e-commerce. So if you're interested, the link is here. Sign up, and when we get enough people to sign up, we might do a free version. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Nicolay. I don't know if anyone has questions. I do have some, but I prefer to leave this space for all of you guys. I can reach out privately to Nicolay. Will we have access to the presentation? Yes. I think there's no problem with you, right, Nicolay? You have access to the presentation? Cool. So yeah, you will have access. I'll post this. All right. See, Amelia is asking. I've had issues training GPTs where it deletes and training data. I mean, I'll just leave it to you.
So basically, do you mean GPTs in ChatGPT? So basically the bots you define, which is what I just showed you? Or do you mean in the chat where you basically insert additional PDFs? I'm not sure what you mean in the edit portal. So it always has a size limit, which might be an issue, and also it has an encoding issue sometimes. So especially if you're working on Microsoft, it sometimes struggles with that. I always tend to use text files or PDF files, and nothing else, because they have the best compliance with that, or they work best with that and always know how to work with it. If that doesn't work, just try to basically command print it new, and then feed that in. So basically the question is, how can we teach our team to use ChatGPT correctly to automate some of the most time-consuming tasks, but to not use it for 100% of their work? So for one, it's always a little bit of complex to not rely on it completely and to maintain a learning curve. So the more you surrender to ChatGPT, the more of the task in the end you lose to do yourself, especially if you're a beginner. This in the end is more about learning what is good. So basically you want to keep them engaged in their craft. And what I often do is, for example, if someone submits me an email, so I often say, like, if it's important customers and stuff like that, I enforce them to send the email first to me before they are allowed to send it out. And like on 10% of those, I just say, no, they can't send it out. It's not good enough without any feedback, to just basically get them to try to improve on their own. And this is something what basically your employees have to learn, like, what does a good email look like? I hope that is detailed enough. And also, what's a good thing is actually just asking them just to do it live. Even if they do it with ChatGPT, they basically just sit in a call and ask them to write an email. and you just sit there. And if you're live on a Zoom call with basically you watching their screen, they often have like a little bit of fear and pressure to do something really quality, what forces them to do stuff on their own. I've struggled with getting ChatGPT to write scripts / captions in a specific tone of voice or style. I try feeding it examples, describing what I want, telling it to reiterate, but still can't get it right. I can quickly share some like specific prompting stuff I always use. Okay. So basically in my prompt, you basically see 3 different sections. The first one is like a general description of what it has to do. And then I always define rules and a process. And the process is basically, this is like you would be using a freelancer where you really have to be specific what he's supposed to do. And the process basically is a step-by-step guide. And these step-by-step guides I've learned often give like a massive improvement in performance, especially if you want a specific style. The issue with long text is you often the instructions get lost if you do it all in the instructions. So if you have some examples, I would actually split it up into different sections. So if you always have like introduction, middle part, conclusion, I would give it a few examples for the instruction, a few examples for the middle part, a few examples for the conclusion, feed that in as a PDF, and tell it has access to files with these different components, and then ask it to generate not all at once, but section by section, and define what it has to do in each section, and always for each section also say it like in which style it should write. Because long text is often a struggle to write because the task is too large. At some point, it just loses track of the instructions. So how I do it is basically I just keep a tab open and I basically ask it questions. I share my screen, and often I'm like a sit in into my Teams meeting, so I don't really have to talk so much. And I just basically take a few questions they ask, or for example, if like a proposal is made, like what are some alternatives to do this, some alternative solutions. And also what questions would you ask here? And I just do it and basically throw it into the chat. So often you need like one person, which is like doing the ChatGPT manager and taking over this part. But at the moment, there are no good tools out there, in my opinion, which really do that on the side and in real time if you have like multi-people meetings. So there are a few which work on like one-on-one, but they aren't that great either. Do you have any examples you know from D2C brands where they are using ChatGPT on a daily basis besides email, customer service, or social media posts? For example, tasks in operations and sourcing. Of D2C brands, no. I know a bunch of companies who are using it for feature discovery, product discovery, and stuff like that. A friend of mine is running a new brand or a new company, which is basically doing AI-powered sourcing for people. And they are basically doing allowing a better search, which is basically just aggregating offers and stuff like that. But also they are using LLMs to basically, in the end, write the interest agreements and stuff like that. And this is something you could check out. In operations is always the most difficult, especially if you're interacting with the real world at the moment, because they aren't reliable enough yet. Since they are probabilistic models, they always, at some point, generate something wrong. And in operations, especially if you're ordering something and stuff like that, you don't really want that. And so you always need a person in between. In the end, this would be really specific. We often do that. So how we look at it, we often sit down in creating this custom stuff or creating custom models for customers for also stuff in like sourcing and operations by sitting down with the experts and basically shadowing them for a day or two to find like tasks which are suitable. But to basically any good examples in there, no.